Welcome to the Yaka Digital Network videos. Globalization is the increasing interconnectedness of economies, societies, and cultures, a world where goods, capital, and information flow across borders with fewer restrictions. For Uganda, this process is often described as a two-edged sword. It offers clear opportunities for growth, but it also carries the risk that smaller nations will be marginalized by larger global forces. We see the impact of this integration in the modern skyline of Kampala. This development is driven by foreign direct investment, which brings in the capital needed to build infrastructure and connect local businesses to the world. However, this influx of foreign interest creates a persistent tension, the choice between maintaining local control and integrating into a global system. To succeed in this environment, the goal is selective adoption, carefully choosing which global trends to accept based on how they impact the economy, local traditions, and national policy. Globalization requires constant filtration. While blind integration risks economic exploitation, total isolation severs access to the very markets and technologies required for modern development. Trade liberalization is one of the primary drivers of this change. By removing tariffs and barriers, Ugandan farmers and businesses gain access to a much larger pool of international buyers. But the same door that allows exports out also allows imports in. Local industries find themselves competing directly with cheaper, mass-produced goods from abroad. This archival look at garment manufacturing shows the kind of local enterprise that is often threatened by these imports. When cheap global products flood the market, it becomes difficult to sustain a Buy Uganda, Build Uganda mindset. Economic integration also relies on capital mobility. Foreign direct investment provides the immediate funds needed to build essential infrastructure, like roads and energy projects. But capital moves out as quickly as it moves in. If a global financial crisis occurs, international investors can pull their money out of the country in an instant, destabilizing the local currency and leaving projects unfinished. This dynamic often pushes nations to stick to their comparative advantage, the specific products they can produce most efficiently for the global market. For many developing states, this means remaining on the periphery of the global economy. Uganda primarily supplies raw materials, like coffee, while wealthier nations in the core maintain control over high-value manufacturing and design. Without active protective policies, economic integration risks trapping a nation at the bottom of the global value chain. Technology has also created a global village, where digital connectivity exposes Ugandans to new ideas and a broader sense of global citizenship. Yet this rapid exposure can lead to homogenization. Global consumer trends and Western lifestyles often arrive so quickly that they overshadow local traditions and heritage. Indigenous languages are particularly vulnerable. When English becomes the dominant language of business and technology, the traditional knowledge systems carried by local languages are often marginalized. This pressure to align with global standards is also visible in politics through a process known as policy convergence. To access favorable trade status, countries are often pushed to adopt market-based reforms dictated by global bodies like the World Trade Organization. This pressure is equally strong when seeking financial support. Access to essential loans from the International Monetary Fund often depends on meeting specific conditions that can limit a country's control over its own domestic policies. To defend against this loss of autonomy, nations are turning to regional blocs. Integrating into the East African community creates a larger, more powerful unit. By acting together, these countries have more negotiating power on the global stage than any single nation could have on its own. This strategy extends across the entire continent, with the African Continental Free Trade Area, which aims to create a single, massive African market to act as a buffer against global shocks. For a single developing nation, the pressure from global institutions is often overwhelming. Regional unity provides the collective weight needed to negotiate from a position of strength. We can see these forces at work in the transformation of Ugandan higher education, which has shifted significantly since the 1990s. For decades, the system was state-subsidized and focused on a traditional academic model, emphasizing humanities and long-term research for national development. Under global economic pressure, universities were pushed to become more self-sustaining. This led to marketization, where institutions began operating more like businesses, relying on private sponsorship and focusing on marketable courses like business and ICT. In an effort to remain globally competitive, curricula were updated to meet international standards, ensuring graduates were technically prepared for the corporate job market. Critics, including Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, argue that this internationalization creates a mismatch. It trains students for global corporate roles, while potentially ignoring Uganda's specific agricultural and industrial innovation needs. There is also the challenge of the digital divide. Globalization promised a revolution in how we learn, but access to that technology remains unequal. Well-funded private schools in urban areas often capture these benefits quickly, while many rural, government-aided schools remain disconnected, widening the educational gap between the wealthy and the poor. Providing tablets puts hardware into classrooms, but the real challenge is transformation. This requires a shift in teaching methods, moving from rote learning to assessments based on actual competence. The marketization of education reveals the central paradox. It connects a few to global standards, while potentially widening the divide at home. Globalization is not a force that is simply good or bad. It is a process that must be carefully navigated. Unmanaged integration acts as a new form of neo-colonialism, keeping developing nations in the role of raw material providers for the rest of the world. The most effective response is selective adoption. This strategy is built on a foundation of national interest, supporting integration only when it serves the country's goals. The first requirement is using policy tools to protect local manufacturers, ensuring they are not wiped out by intense global competition. Second, there must be an active effort to promote Ugandan heritage and values alongside global exposure to prevent cultural homogenization. Finally, responsible leadership ensures that opening markets does not sacrifice basic rights, such as access to affordable healthcare and education. Only then is global integration sustainable. The goal for students to remember is that Uganda must participate in the global economy on its own terms, adopting the best technological practices while defending its public equity. You can watch more videos for all classes here and get all content at www.yaka.cc.